Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to this week's episode of the Culture Clinic Show. So, this show is where we help HR leaders like you shape a culture where people love to work. My name's Julia. I'm on the people team here at Gusto. And so, part of my role is helping oversee our peer to peer program, recognition program here at Gusto. And today, with my colleague Shelly, we're going to be talking about boosting participation in peer to peer programs. Shelly, hello, welcome. Tell us a little bit about you.
Oh, thanks, Julia. I'm Shelly DaCosta. I'm thrilled to be here and discussing recognition. After working in rewards for 30 plus years in a variety of workplaces, from healthcare to high tech and retail and insurance, you know, I, I'd like to say I've seen it all, but the workplace is constantly changing. And I think that's what's so energizing. And rewards and recognition change along with it. So it's always great to come on these calls and talk about new or tried and true ideas here today. It's great.
Awesome. And Shelly, this is our first one that we're doing together, which is very
Yes, I'm
exciting.
looking
So
forward to this. We'll see
M-
how it
Me
goes.
too. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Awesome. And so, folks tuning in, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Just so you know, this is an Ask Us Anything format. And so, please put your questions for Shelly, our Total Rewards expert, in the chat. And we can chat through all things kind of people and culture, total rewards, recognition, best practices, and all of that kind of stuff. Hey, Chelsea, welcome. And today, what we're going to be really like zoning in on and focusing on through our conversation is boosting participation in peer-to-peer recognition programs. And so let's set the scene. Like, what exactly are we talking about? So a lot of us are familiar with milestone recognition programs, and maybe, you've implemented a manager top-down budgeted program, all really great things. But why is the next step a peer-to-peer recognition program? Why are peer-to-peer programs great, Shelly?
Oh, wow. I've seen so many peer-to-peer programs work so well in organizations, and there's an energy about them because it's really taking recognition to that next step of involving all the employees in creating that culture of recognition, right? And it's like a domino effect when you take it past the leaders, and now employees are recognizing one another, whether it's for values you've rolled out, or it's just for gratitude to say thank you. It's just it can mean so much in the organization, and it can contribute in such a strong way to creating that recognition culture that you want. They're like sowing the seeds. It gets me really excited. It's great to really work on a peer to peer and get it up and running.
Cool. Awesome. And you're right. I mean, it's funny, like managers giving recognition and giving kudos to their team is awesome, but it's also their job, hopefully that's something they're going to be doing on a good day, no matter what. And so it is exciting when recognition can like go deeper than just manager giving praise to their team and see the effects of it happening on a peer-to-peer level.
It can mean so much from peer to peer, like to have that colleague of yours acknowledge what you do, have that colleague, say, welcome to the organization. I'm glad you're here. And it was great to work with you on that program. That can just mean so much.
Totally. Awesome. Okay. And then in terms of the challenges of a peer-to-peer program, something we hear a lot from clients is that participation is challenging. And so why is it sometimes challenging? This is a question we got in advance. Why is it sometimes challenging to drive participation in peer-to-peer programs in the first place?
Uh, Sometimes it's just like awareness and education, right?
Hmm.
Or that the employees don't realize that they actually can do this, that it is part of, the recognition platform, the recognition tool, et cetera. It wasn't part of their orientation. Nobody kind of told them, there's this button you can go to, and this is what you can do, and this is why we're doing this, et cetera. Or ease of use. How are you making it easy for them and understanding what the impact is and what it's all about? And and for that employee, it's a little bit like paying it forward. It can be so important because especially if they get acknowledged and recognized, now they get to have that, give that same feeling to somebody else. Right. And it's a domino effect. It just goes on and on in the organization. So
Totally.
there's lots of reasons why it can be challenging, but you can dig in and find out for your organization what some of the secret sauce is to get it working.
Or some of the barriers of like, if it takes, we talk about this a lot, but if it takes multiple levels of admin approval in order to send recognition, chances are your participation is going to be a challenge.
Absolutely. Like that whole ease of use, push it out to the leaders, push it out to the employees wherever you can.
Totally. And then in terms of participation, how do you know where you're at? Like, what's a good participation level? How do you even measure it? How do you know if you have good participation?
You can always look at, a lot of the reports and things like that. Like even in Guso, you can get your utilization reports, and you can look at the budget. For example, if you have peer to peer that's monetary versus if you have peer to peer where it's not monetary, but you can still look at the usage of the dollars. Um, but I think it's important to look at what you're trying to achieve, and more important than that overall participation rate, it's incremental differences. Like increment, are you incrementally increasing? More people participated and gave awards last year than this year, or this year than last year, right? So it's constantly getting better and better, and you're making those small changes, and it's becoming second nature. You're not having to do all the reminders like, oh, at the beginning of every one of our one-on-ones, we're going to talk about recognition, or we're going to have these leader meetings and we're going to talk about recognition and announce it. And, those are all great things to get peer to peer working. But you can start to look at, wow, we didn't do that this year and this month, and yet participation improved. So that's a big win, right? So it's not a good participation level. I think you really want to look at what was important in your organization. Were you relaunching a program and trying to revitalize? And so did you achieve that? That's almost better than the numbers type of thing specifically. Or is it brand new and you're just rolling out participate for the first time? Or have you tied it to some specific values and behaviors, and now you're seeing an uptake in those behaviors through recognition?
Totally. Yeah. And I think another interesting thing we were talking about just before is like, recognition being successful in your organization is more than just having a recognition tool that people use. Those things are really important. And of course, you want people to use it. But the more that recognition can be less about the tool and more about the culture of your organization. Like, do people recognize each other for a job well done, regardless of whether it's in the tool or not? Are
Exactly.
people reaching out to people across departmental and giving positive feedback? Like, is it something that you value in your organization?
Yeah, and it starts to become how people treat one another, right? Like you see it day to day. People are saying thank you, and people are expressing gratitude and recognizing that somebody put in some extra hours, or somebody went above and beyond, or jumped and put their hand up to be on that team or do that extra work. And when you see that being recognized and you create that kind of culture, that's what it just is so energetic in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. And then we talked a little bit about the why. Like, maybe the goal is not to get 100% utilization. In fact, I don't think any of us will, and that's okay. But talk a little bit more about like how you can consider your program successful if it meets the goal of the program, the why of what we're even
Yeah.
doing in the first place.
Yeah, it really goes back to what you're trying to achieve. So, if you're trying to create an organization and you're setting up behaviors and values that you want people to recognize, so you're actually using your recognition tool to kind of incentivize that amongst people. And you suddenly see people, acting more like a team and recognizing one another more, and you have that kind of, you're not having the complaints, and you're having more positive employee experience programs, and you're having more higher engagement scores, and your retention is going up. All of those are wins that can be attributed in many cases to the recognition program and what it's trying to do. So the numbers are important, and you always want to kind of incrementally be getting better, but you want to go back to that why, and that recognition starts to become less of a tick box.
Hmm.
Well, it's something we do at the meeting or something I do every Thursday morning. I mean, you may have to put in a program where it's like, hey, Thursday mornings are recognition time. Take a look. Is there somebody you want to recognize in order to get the ball rolling, etc. But you want it to become, just like I said, how people treat one another, and becoming that kind of a human relations employer. right? Just
Mhm.
how people are, and that will make people feel connected and want to be with this organization.
And from like a psychological standpoint, people aren't really as motivated by like to-do lists, tasks that they have to do, something you put in your calendar of like send recognition. Again, it's a really good way to hold yourself accountable and make sure you're doing it. But ideally, it's so woven into like the fabric of how we are as an organization, that it's something you want to do to make somebody else feel great and to make
Right.
somebody else understand that what they did was awesome and why.
Yeah, and when they see that happening in the organization, they start to realize, wow, this is something this organization espouses to. This is something that this organization values, this recognition thing. So I want to get on board with that because this is making me feel better and my colleagues feel better. And it's, making this feel like the organization I want to be working for.
The budget that employers put into certain programs speaks a lot about the values of the organization, right? Like you're not going to put in, well, maybe you disagree, but I feel like you're not going to put in like 2% of payroll into a recognition program if you don't care about recognition, right?
Right, right. Absolutely. But on the other hand, we often say, like, people are like, "Oh, I can't put in a peer-to-peer recognition program. I can't do that, and then I won't get the participation, etc." Doesn't always have to be monetary. You can put in a peer-to-peer where, people are sending high fives and acknowledging one another, and there's an authenticity to that that doesn't have a dollar value attached, that can still be extremely meaningful in an organization.
Hmm.
If we often say, if you don't have the dollars to make a peer-to-peer recognition meaningful rewards, and I'm talking, something very, very meaningful, then leave those dollars in with your leader recognition program, because that's important to people. That is important, that, when my leader acknowledges me, yes, it's great, all these words, and that they are taking the time out and they know who I am and all of those things, but there's a monetary piece to it, that's saying they value my job and what I do, etc. That's great. But in the peer to peer, you can still achieve a lot of great things without necessarily going monetary.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's almost there's a point to be made of like if you can't, like you were saying, if you can't set up a monetary program that's meaningful enough, and I think we see this with points programs where like, yeah, it's 1,000 points, but it's actually peanuts. It's
Yeah,
actually maybe
yeah,
five
that's like
dollars.
$10 or $5. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
It maybe
A
kind of feels
well
like more of
worded,
a
yeah,
totally
means so much
more of a
more.
thanks for nothing kind of thing, and maybe it's more worth it to save it to next year when you can implement a more meaningful budgeted program, and you can find a lot of value and a lot of meaning in a non-monetary program.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. And then so if someone's having challenges with participation, Shelly, what are some creative program ideas that you can use to drive participation rather in peer-to-peer programs?
I always say there's nothing like a little bit of friendly, competition in organizations. So monthly leaderboards often help a lot, right? So, oh wow, look at that team. They're doing lots of recognition, and it's all over Slack and it's all over Yammer what they're doing in that team. And how about our team? How do we get this going here? What's so those are important pieces, and team recognition goals. We want to make sure that we're recognized as much as the rest of the organization, or we want to make sure we're acknowledging people at the end of this project, the beginning of the project, the hard slugging in the middle of the project. So this is where we're going to kind of set some recognition goals. um, I, you've got to weave it into the culture, the regular occurrences, have it in your team meetings, and have the visibility to it. So I always like where we're able to work with a communications team and communications experts in the organization, with HR, and use all of those appropriate type of venues, whether it's the newsletters and the all hands meetings and the banner that comes across, the ticker tape that shows, when you log into your computer in the morning and it shows the stock price. It's also showing, recognition that's happening in the organization, and call outs and shout outs and things like that. All of that helps drive that participation, because you're like, I want to be called out, or I want so and so to be recognized. Darn, I didn't put them in. I need to add that, because I don't want to forget that next month. I've got some great people on my team, and I want to make sure they're there. And my colleagues, etc. So it starts to become a bit contagious, which again creates the seeds for that recognition culture.
Totally. And the power of seeing what the influencers at your organization are doing is super, super powerful. Like when you see other teams like rocking recognition, like, oh, we got to rock recognition next month.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. And
yeah.
there's
And I think
an energy attached to the visibility of it when people are straight, right? In that competition. Yeah.
totally. And I think whether it's remote or frontline or in an office, I think there are a lot of creative ways you can do this. Like when I worked at the student pub on campus, I loved the poster board that got updated every month. And at the bottom it had kind of all the we called it cheers, but the shout outs and recognition given.
Yeah.
And so it can be something like tied into something that you're already doing, that you're already doing well. If people are already reading the monthly newsletter, already engaging with this and that, bring that visibility to where people are already working.
Absolutely. Like there definitely is some challenges where you've got, deskless workers, or you're in retail with, so many different divisions, or you don't have a physical space where you can have a TV when people are, where they're having their coffee and they're having their lunch, and on the monitor and the TV, you're able to update everybody. But then look to, for that population, how are you getting your other communication pieces across, right? So those employees in the deskless environment or in the retail environment still have to have an option where they can see their pay stub. They still have to have an option where they can find information about their benefits. Use those vehicles in the same way to communicate recognition, right? They're there, and whether it's there's a computer available to them or it's on their handheld device, whatever, there's ways to do it and tie it in so that it can become just as valuable.
Absolutely. Something we really work hard at Gusto, to make our product inclusive and to make it, available to employees, whether they're like me and they work remotely from home all of the time, or complete opposite, where they work, in the front lines at a cash register, they're a nurse, anything like that. And so one thing you can do on Gusto is send recognition on behalf of someone else. And so you could be really creative here. If a manager can go around every Friday and collect sticky notes of different recognition that their team members want to send to one another, and it takes a little bit of manual work, but the impact it has when you're able to use the product, use the platform to send recognition on behalf of everybody is pretty huge.
And that's even great visibility for that leader to see who of their people are recognizing and going out of their way to, put that person's name on the sticky note or push it forward, etc. And acknowledge that too.
Totally. Awesome. And then next question, shifting gears a little bit here. Does having clear guidelines on when and how to recognize peers help? Or should you give people kind of like all the freedom when it comes to the recognition that they're giving?
Yeah. It really depends kind of on, like, again, where you are in your organization, like, and in your recognition journey, if you will. Is it brand new? And are you using recognition potentially because it's so valuable for this to launch something or create and incentivize certain behaviors in the organization or values? A lot of times we kind of stick to guidelines for recognition, that you're recognizing outcomes, right? They delivered a result, and these were the outcomes, and because they did it, I'm going to recognize it. Or a particular effort, the employee worked really hard on a project, so I'm recognizing that effort that they put out. A lot of people often call it like going above and beyond their job. Milestones, that's a very common, introduction into recognition, we'd like to say, but older programs where, they completed a project, or milestones related to years of service and acknowledgement for that. And then values, right? The employee is demonstrating a company core value. So all of those can be that kind of a clear guidelines, but it depends on, like, is that what you're doing? You've launched new values, or you have a new product you want everybody to be aware of and learn and have some training. So you're going to link it to those and recognize the achievement around that. But it depends on that goals, like more mature programs that you're trying to revitalize. You may want to leave it more open and do a lot of communication around it and leave it kind of organic for employees to recognize one another on what they feel is important. Or if it's a program that's brand new and you're launching it, you want to create that kind of guidelines for leaders or employees in a peer to peer on what's appropriate to recognize and shout out about. Because, sometimes that's what holds people back is, "Oh, I don't know what to say, or I don't know what I can and can't recognize." So in those cases, you may want something a lot more structured.
Fair. Yeah, I don't get the idea that you'd want to be like, especially if you're concerned and you're listening in today to boost participation. I don't think you'd want to be overly prescriptive unless your program was something really, really particular and if someone's like really straying from that lane. But I think in most cases, you're not going to get bad recognition. Maybe it could be more effective in the way that it's phrased and talking about situation, behavior, impact, all of that kind of stuff. But I think if you're really wanting to boost it and just get people recognizing each other, get it into the culture of your organization, you probably can't go too wrong with, the tool being used or recognition being given.
Exactly. Because it's
Cool.
just going to keep building.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. The next question we have here is, should you use different tactics to boost participation depending on whether you have a budgeted program or a non-monetary program? Or are the tactics we talked about earlier of like clear communication, inclusivity, all that kind of stuff, like does it translate pretty well?
Yeah. So, you know, it, it's important. Yeah. If the participation is low in a budgeted program, right? You want to make sure the budget's meaningful enough, like we talked, because if it's not, just do a non-monetary and focus on the usage and the understanding and creating the recognition culture as opposed to points and dollars and things like that, right? The dollars shouldn't really matter if your goal is to kind of drive up recognition. The importance of employee peer-to-peer is more often the recognition itself than the dollars, right? People feel there's a real authenticity to a peer-to-peer, right? Because they're the people kind of, maybe in the trenches with me, working alongside, and they know how tough it is sometimes. And so to have them recognize, you want your leader recognition for sure, but this peer-to-peer can mean a great deal with or without dollars attached. So I'd say the tactics can be quite similar once you determine whether it should be monetary or not, right? And once you have that sorted out, right? um eh, but the dollar piece again, I think about back in the day when we did 360-degree feedback for employees linked to their learning goals and their development and their performance over the course of the year, right? So, I've reached out to everybody that you report to, Julia, or you come in contact with, and the people that work for you, et cetera. And I'm going to do that full 360. And we're seeing where people, if it had a link to dollars, as in what you might receive for an increase that year, we really saw people pull away from giving authentic information. Am I really going to say, "Oh, Julia needs some more development around this and this and this," if I think that that's going to stop Julia from receiving her salary increase this year? So, in human resources, we separated that out because we were like, no, it's more important to have that valuable information. Have it separate should really have nothing to do. It is more important that you get the development that you need. So don't link it to the compensation. And it's the same thing here sometimes with peer to peer, where you want to reinforce that culture and the authenticity of somebody saying, there's no dollars attached to this, but it's so meaningful that somebody stepped up and took the time to do this and acknowledged the work. They saw it. They see me. I can be included.
Especially a peer, because it's not their job. Like we said before, your manager, if they're a good manager, they're giving you some recognition, or at least hopefully not, but at least quarterly at performance reviews or something to that effect, you're getting some feedback and you're getting some praise for a job well done. But when it comes from a peer, they thought of me, like they noticed that, it really, and it's as a recipient of recognition at an organizational peer-to-peer level, like it feels really cool when somebody, when I get a piece of recognition, it's a surprise. I don't see it coming. I don't even know necessarily that what I did was highly impactful for someone else. It's really cool.
Yeah, we always say, employees leave leaders in an organization, but who you work alongside and who you work with in terms of your peers and your colleagues are often really critical to how you feel about the organization, whether you feel you fit. And I think it was a Gallup poll last year that said something like only 25%, this is very sad, of employees feel that they fit with the culture, or feel connected to the culture in their organization. And so peer-to-peer recognition can help employees feel like they belong to the organization, right? Oh wow, I'm being seen here, I'm being acknowledged, I fit, this follows alongside with what I value in an organization, and now they value me. So it can, can help with inclusivity. It can, like, there's just that whole sense of this is where I belong, right? It's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, the sense of belonging really can't be understated,
Yeah.
as something that's really important. Cool, awesome. And then this is a question. I like this question. I think it's, if you have strong participation rates, so your program's going well, overall things are bustling. Is it okay if some employees just like aren't using the program?
Hmm. I think you want to really get back to your why. Like, my answer to this one's kind of yes and no. Can you find out why they aren't using the program, and get rid of any of the barriers as to why they aren't using the program? Do they need some help and guidance? Do they not understand how it's working? Lots of people want to express gratitude and recognition to somebody, but they don't have the words or the mechanism. So, Gusto and a recognition tool can provide that platform, but they're like still looking for the words. I mean, that's why Hallmark makes as much money as it does, is it gives us the words to say, right? And so you can provide that for those employees, kind of, hit this button says team, and that helps me put the words together to say, hey Julia, I love being on your team, thank you so much for joining our team, I want to give you a high five, or applause, or what have you. And another one might be gratitude. Thanks so much for the work that you did on that, etc. And it gives you those words, and it gives you that mechanism to do it. So that's what I try to explore. You also are never going to get that kind of 100% participation from everybody. You're always going to have somebody that doesn't quite believe in it or can't get on board. You got to consider cultural norms, right? You got to have to look at people's comfort level, and they themselves may not be comfortable with something that they would see as public recognition. So they're assuming their colleagues may not be as well. So that's, something you want to explore. Look at the values alignment, right, and what's going on. And then look at their engagement in other areas of the organization, right? Be cognizant of that, because is this somebody, like, is it an indicator that this is somebody on their way out? Is it indicator of somebody that's just not participating because they're not comfortable in the organization, or they don't have time, or they don't understand how it works? Like, there's just so much.
Totally.
And sometimes it's okay.
Yeah. I think so too. Yeah, my answer to this also, when I was thinking about it, was like, it's it's probably okay, but I think this is also where you want to parse out, are they just not using the program, but they're still engaged in your culture of recognition? Because those two things can be different. And like that's okay. Yes, we want people to use the tool for many, many reasons. Um, you know, leadership buy-in, and to show
Yeah.
like the effectiveness of the tool, reporting, all of that. But if the tool like isn't comfortable, if public recognition is not someone's jam, but they are still engaged in the culture of recognition, showing recognition privately, all that kind of stuff, I'm okay with that.
Yep. Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
depends
Hmm.
on what else is going on. I think the why are they not using the program?
Yeah.
Totally cool.
Exactly.
Um, we're almost at time here, Shelley.
Okay.
Let's do our end of AMA takeaways. And so, if there's one, two max things that really stuck out to you today that you'd want people to kind of leave with, a couple of nuggets, what would they be?
So I think the one that I probably repeated a couple times would be that it doesn't have to be monetary. You can start with a peer-to-peer program that does not have to have dollars attached to it. And in fact, in many cases, unless it can be meaningful dollars, I would start with something without dollars attached to it, get that authenticity and get that built in. And then, down the road, maybe you can add more budget, et cetera, et cetera. But if it's not meaningful, but still work to put the peer-to-peer in place, right? Monetary or non-monetary, but it's still a really valuable, make it non-monetary if you haven't got the budget.
Totally. Awesome. And I think mine is just what we also talked about a couple times, but of like recognition can be via a tool, but recognition is a culture in and of itself. And so use the tool to drive the culture of recognition that you want to foster at your organization.
Yeah.
Kind of parsing those out.
For
Cool.
sure. For sure. And use all those things we talked about, from communication and awareness and ease of use and all of those things. So,
Yeah.
and more
Inclusive
than the
program
number,
design.
like you said,
Totally.
more than the numbers, more than a tick box.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, Shelly, it was an absolute pleasure to have you join me today. Thank you so much. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Feel free to stop by same time next week. Joe and Kwesi are going to be talking about how to start small. So how to start small with a recognition program and grow from there. So
Awesome.
be sure to catch that. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thanks, Shelly.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, everybody. Bye.